October 24th, 1942. The night stretches black over the Pacific. Waves crash against the hull with relentless force, shivering the deck beneath the crew's boots. Cold winds bite through wool uniforms. Breath forms ghostly clouds in the dim glow of signal lamps. Somewhere in the distance, enemy silhouettes move silently, unaware of the steel lurking in the dark. On board, sailors huddle over charts and instruments, eyes straining toward the horizon. Every radar blip, every faint whisper of engines could mean survival or destruction. The ship's massive guns, dormant until now, glint under moonlight, ready to roar with precision. For months, this vessel has been underestimated, dismissed as just another American battleship, slower than carriers, overshadowed by larger names in naval history. Yet tonight, in the cold, shadowed waters of the Pacific, that perception is about to change. Every calculation, every maneuver, every disciplined hand at its station carries the weight of lives and the fate of fleets. Somewhere far ahead, the enemy plots, confident they face a predictable, conventional opponent. They do not yet know the skill, technology, and determination that lie in the steel and heart of this ship. The ocean waits, the guns wait, and in 7 minutes, history will bear witness to a moment that proves the underestimated can become unforgettable. By late 1942, the Pacific War had reached a critical juncture. The Imperial Japanese Navy had expanded rapidly after Pearl Harbor, sweeping across Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific, claiming islands, ports, and airfields with frightening speed. Japanese carriers and battleships projected power from the Philippines to the Solomon Islands, and American forces struggled to respond to the unprecedented pace of expansion. Every island taken by Japan represented a forward base, a launch point for planes, artillery, and fleets that could threaten supply lines across the Pacific. The United States Navy, still reeling from the losses at Pearl Harbor, had spent months rebuilding, reorganizing, and innovating. Battleships, though once considered the dominant capital ships, were now technically overshadowed by aircraft carriers. Admirals debated the strategic value of these hulking vessels. Critics labeled many as too slow, too vulnerable, or simply irrelevant in a carrier-focused theater. Yet within the steel hulls and the disciplined crews lay latent power. Firepower capable of precise, long-range strikes, a combination of radar-guided accuracy and sheer destructive capability. Among these vessels, one battleship stood quietly in the shadows of its more celebrated sisters. While the USS Washington and other fast battleships received headlines, this particular ship had proven itself repeatedly in lesser-known operations. Convoy protection, escort missions, and limited bombardments against fortified positions. Its crew, trained in relentless drills, had honed the coordination required for night engagements, a skill still rare in the U.S. fleet. Their vessels' radar systems, cutting edge for the era, allowed targeting and tracking beyond visual range, a technology that Japanese commanders often underestimated. Meanwhile, the Solomon Islands campaign was in full swing. Guadalcanal, Tulagi, and nearby positions had become contested ground. American and Japanese forces engaged in a series of naval skirmishes, supply raids, and night battles. The stakes were enormous. Control of these islands meant dominance over sea lanes vital for resupplying troops and maintaining strategic initiative. For the U.S. Navy, success required not only boldness but precision, coordination, and an understanding of the enemy's tactics. The Japanese relied on night attacks, torpedo strikes, and aggressive maneuvers to compensate for slower replenishment and stretched supply lines. It was in this environment, conflicted, tense, and fogged with uncertainty, that the most underrated American battleship readied itself for a confrontation that would challenge assumptions. Radar screens flickered with faint blips, charts were studied under dim light, and every sailor knew that a single miscalculation could spell disaster. The Pacific was a theater defined by extremes, vast distances, violent storms, scorching heat, and the ever-present threat of sudden, deadly engagement. Every ship, every gun, every crew member had to function with near-perfect synchronization. Though overshadowed in public discourse, the battleship's potential lay in its combination of speed, firepower, and technological edge. Unlike larger or older vessels, it had undergone upgrades that made night engagements possible, a capability that would soon define its moment in history. While carriers launched planes for reconnaissance and strikes, this ship could deliver instant, devastating punishment directly against enemy warships without intermediaries, a raw expression of steel and gunpowder in the dark waters. The stage was set, two navies maneuvering under moonless nights, a campaign that could tip the balance in the Solomon Islands, and a vessel poised to defy expectations. For months, observers had dismissed its role, unaware that history was quietly being prepared. The coming engagement would not be won by bravado alone, nor by sheer numbers. It would hinge on training, coordination, and the untested synergy of human skill and emerging radar technology. In this crucible, the underestimated American battleship would confront the largest threats the Japanese Navy could muster, an encounter that would demonstrate that mastery in warfare sometimes lies not in fame, but in readiness, precision, and execution. As 1942 waned, the waters around the Solomon Islands became a deadly chessboard. The Japanese Navy, confident from months of rapid expansion, maintained a network of supply convoys and warships designed to reinforce their positions. Their battleships, carriers, and cruisers had proven formidable in daylight actions, but their reliance on night attacks and torpedo tactics revealed vulnerabilities to a navy that combined patience, planning, and technology. Intelligence intercepts and reconnaissance reports indicated patterns, but predicting when and where the next strike would come remained a constant challenge. American naval leadership understood that seizing the initiative required more than brute force. Commanders placed a premium on coordination, integrating cruisers, destroyers, and the capital ships into layered formations capable of both defense and counterattack. Every maneuver had to account for enemy radar limitations, line-of-sight restrictions, and the treacherous currents of narrow channels. Convoys transporting troops and supplies through the Solomon Archipelago faced ambush at every turn, making vigilance and discipline paramount. The battleship at the center of this narrative, though overshadowed by more famous vessels like the USS Washington or USS South Dakota, had been quietly refining its capabilities. Crews conducted night drills with relentless rigor, practicing gunnery, spotting, and radar-assisted targeting. Every officer understood that a fraction of a second could determine victory or destruction. The ship's radar systems, a relatively new innovation for the U.S. fleet, allowed tracking beyond visual range and in total darkness, providing a strategic advantage over opponents who still relied heavily on optical sightings. Meanwhile, Japanese naval commanders, confident in their superior experience, sought to exploit any perceived weaknesses. Their formations emphasized torpedo launches under cover of night, rapid approach vectors, and hit-and-run tactics. However, they underestimated the adaptability of American forces, who were beginning to integrate radar data into tactical planning. The stage was set for a confrontation that would highlight not only the lethality of steel and firepower, but the growing importance of technological mastery in modern naval warfare. The Solomon campaign had become a proving ground for innovation. Battleships, once considered relics of an earlier era, were evolving into precision instruments. Radar-guided gunnery transformed them from lumbering giants into weapons capable of striking with surgical accuracy. The underrated American battleship embodied this shift. Agile, well-commanded, and equipped to engage the enemy on terms dictated not solely by visibility or luck, but by careful calculation and preparation. In the weeks leading up to the decisive encounter, reconnaissance planes traced enemy movements while cryptography units intercepted communications, providing glimpses of Japanese intentions. Commanders studied these fragments, building mental maps of potential engagement zones. Every exercise, drill, and intelligence report converged toward one purpose: readiness. The ocean could be both ally and adversary, concealing threats in fog, darkness, or sudden squalls. Success depended on patience, discipline, and the flawless execution of well-rehearsed procedures. By nightfall of the fateful engagement, the underrated battleship was more than just a steel vessel. It was a platform of integrated strategy. Its guns were primed, radar operators vigilant, and crew members trained to respond with near-automatic precision. While the Japanese fleet approached under the cloak of darkness, confident in their historical dominance, they were unaware that the balance of night combat was about to shift. What had long been dismissed as an unremarkable ship would demonstrate that readiness, coupled with emerging technology, could redefine expectations. In the calm before the storm, the American Navy's underestimated capital ship waited silently in the dark waters, its presence unheralded, its potential untested. Soon, the clash would begin, a confrontation that would expose assumptions, test training, and solidify the battleship's place in naval history. The sailors aboard the battleship carried the weight of history on their shoulders. Each man understood the gravity of their mission, not only in terms of national duty, but personal survival. Gunners, loaders, radar operators, and lookouts worked in a choreography refined through months of training. Fatigue weighed heavily. Long watches, sleepless nights, and the constant hum of engines etched lines of concentration into their faces. Yet, beneath the exhaustion, there was resolve, a quiet determination to prove that skill and preparation could rival raw firepower. In the cramped quarters below deck, mechanics checked every turret and engine system, their hands stained with grease, eyes scanning for faults invisible to the untrained observer. Officers moved deliberately through the corridors, issuing precise orders with measured calm, knowing that panic in even one section could ripple across the entire ship. Among the sailors, camaraderie was palpable. Whispered encouragements, shared glances, and the occasional reassuring hand on a shoulder created a human network that bridged hierarchy and function. When the Japanese fleet drew near, the human element would prove decisive. The contrast between disciplined American crews and the overconfident enemy became stark under fire. Training, cohesion, and experience converted fear into effectiveness, turning ordinary men into instruments of coordinated action. The ship itself became an extension of human skill, a testament to the idea that technology without people was merely potential, whereas people, properly trained, could realize that potential fully. Tactical angle. From a tactical perspective, the battleship's success relied on more than firepower. Commanders leveraged positioning, concealment, and environmental conditions to shape the engagement. Navigating narrow channels and using the cover of darkness, the Americans forced the Japanese into disadvantageous lines of approach. The ship's radar allowed precise tracking of enemy vessels even in pitch-black conditions, transforming traditional night combat into a measured exchange of fire. Formations mattered. Cruisers and destroyers operated in protective arcs, screening the capital ship from torpedo attacks while providing additional layers of observation. Every maneuver was pre-calculated. Each vessel had specific sectors of fire and responsibility. The Japanese, accustomed to relying on speed and surprise, faced unexpected resistance. Their torpedo attacks were met with organized salvos and countermeasures, a demonstration of how preparation and coordination could disrupt even seasoned opponents. Tactical foresight extended beyond individual movements. Intelligence reports guided positioning, indicating likely enemy paths and timing. The battleship's gunnery teams integrated this data into firing solutions, meaning that every salvo was not merely a reaction, but a calculated strike aimed at disrupting formations, disabling weapons, and inflicting maximum structural damage. The engagement was not chaos. It was a deliberate, orchestrated execution of naval strategy. Technological angle. The battleship's true advantage lay in technology, particularly radar-assisted gunnery, a revolutionary tool in naval warfare. Prior to its widespread adoption, night engagements depended on searchlights, optical spotting, and human intuition. The introduction of radar changed the rules entirely. allowing the ship to detect, track, and target enemy vessels without visual confirmation. Gunnery officers monitored screens displaying blips that represented ships beyond the horizon, translating electronic signals into precise firing data. Calculators and plotting boards converted this information into trajectory and timing solutions, allowing shells to strike before the enemy could react. The Japanese, operating largely without equivalent radar support, were forced to contend with an invisible adversary, one whose reach extended into the darkness where they assumed safety. Complementing radar were improvements in fire control systems, stabilization mechanisms, and shell design. Turrets could rotate smoothly under command. Rangefinders translated distances into actionable angles, and shell fuses optimized detonation for maximum effect. Each technological enhancement magnified the crew's effectiveness, demonstrating that innovation, rather than sheer tonnage, could tip the balance in a naval duel. By integrating human skill, tactical ingenuity, and technological edge, the underrated battleship became a force that belied its reputation. Observers might have dismissed it on paper, but in the crucible of combat, the convergence of these elements allowed it to deliver a decisive blow with precision and confidence. Command aboard the battleship exemplified clarity under pressure. Officers maintained calm voices even as enemy shells threatened to tear the deck apart. Decisions were immediate, yet measured. Every maneuver, every salvo was the product of deliberate assessment. The captain, standing on the bridge amid the cold night air, monitored radar screens and charts while issuing succinct commands. His knowledge of both the ship's capabilities and the enemy's tendencies allowed him to orchestrate a symphony of action, turning a single vessel into a decisive instrument of war. Subordinate officers translated orders into execution. Gun captains synchronized firing sequences. Engineers balanced power distribution, and communications teams relayed updates without hesitation. Leadership was not simply rank. It was a living presence that rippled through the crew. Confidence emanated from command, reinforcing the sailors' own belief in their training and equipment. The Japanese fleet, despite numerical superiority, faced a decisively coordinated opponent, where leadership converted human potential into tangible results. The impact of leadership extended beyond immediate combat. After-action assessments, strategic foresight, and contingency planning ensured that victories could be repeated and lessons retained. It was a demonstration of how disciplined, insightful leadership could amplify every other advantage the battleship possessed, cementing its role as a decisive force despite its underrated status. Enemy angle. The Japanese commanders underestimated the ship they faced. Conditioned by prior engagements, their tactics favored aggressive maneuvers and concentrated firepower, assuming visual superiority and surprise would dictate outcomes. Yet the Americans, leveraging radar and disciplined formations, disrupted these assumptions. The enemy's confidence, once an asset, became a liability as they engaged a vessel capable of striking from unseen distances with precise timing. Japanese sailors, trained for speed and maneuverability, confronted a new reality. They could be targeted effectively at night, even in poor visibility. Their torpedoes, meticulously aimed, were countered by coordinated evasive actions and suppressive fire. Each salvo that missed or fell short intensified pressure, eroding morale and increasing the likelihood of mistakes. The battleship's unexpected effectiveness forced Japanese commanders to adapt mid-battle, a rare acknowledgement of being outmatched despite favorable conditions. This encounter highlighted the broader lesson that technological and tactical innovation could nullify traditional advantages. The Japanese fleet, formidable in surface engagement and night operations, confronted a foe that redefined the rules, proving that even a highly capable adversary could falter when the variables of human skill, leadership, and technology combined in unforeseen ways. Moral/psychological angle. Combat imposed immense psychological strain. For the crew, the night was an arena of heightened awareness, fear, and anticipation. Every radar ping, every distant shell explosion, heightened tension, yet also underscored the importance of vigilance. Success in these conditions reinforced confidence. Failure could erode it instantly. For the Americans, repeated hits on enemy vessels delivered not only strategic advantage, but psychological reinforcement, a validation of training, discipline, and preparedness. Conversely, the Japanese sailors experienced disorientation and frustration. Struck before they could visually identify the enemy, they faced an invisible threat that challenged conventional understanding of naval combat. The morale effects of invisible, precise attacks were profound, forcing reconsideration of assumptions and introducing doubt into previously confident ranks. For the observers and historians, these psychological dimensions provide insight into why the battleship was underrated. Its reputation did not account for the morale, coordination, and mental resilience of its crew. Combat effectiveness is not measured solely in tonnage or armor, but in the ability to maintain composure under stress, execute complex procedures flawlessly, and exploit the enemy's errors. In this way, the human mind became as critical a weapon as any turret or shell. Summary of Section 2 Angles. By examining leadership, enemy response, and the psychological dimension, it becomes clear why the battleship's performance defied expectations. Individual skill, coordinated command, and mental resilience converged with technology and tactics to create a vessel whose impact exceeded its perceived value. What was overlooked on paper became undeniable on the water, revealing the true measure of an underrated warship's significance. Command aboard the battleship exemplified clarity under pressure. Officers maintained calm voices even as enemy shells threatened to tear the deck apart. Decisions were immediate, yet measured. Every maneuver, every salvo was the product of deliberate assessment. The captain, standing on the bridge amid the cold night air, monitored radar screens and charts while issuing succinct commands. His knowledge of both the ship's capabilities and the enemy's tendencies allowed him to orchestrate a symphony of action, turning a single vessel into a decisive instrument of war. Subordinate officers translated orders into execution. Gun captains synchronized firing sequences, engineers balanced power distribution, and communications teams relayed updates without hesitation. Leadership was not simply rank. It was a living presence that rippled through the crew. Confidence emanated from command, reinforcing the sailors' own belief in their training and equipment. The Japanese fleet, despite numerical superiority, faced a decisively coordinated opponent, where leadership converted human potential into tangible results. The impact of leadership extended beyond immediate combat. After-action assessments, strategic foresight, and contingency planning ensured that victories could be repeated and lessons retained. It was a demonstration of how disciplined, insightful leadership could amplify every other advantage the battleship possessed, cementing its role as a decisive force despite its underrated status. Enemy angle. The Japanese commanders underestimated the ship they faced. Conditioned by prior engagements, their tactics favored aggressive maneuvers and concentrated firepower, assuming visual superiority and surprise would dictate outcomes. Yet the Americans, leveraging radar and disciplined formations, disrupted these assumptions. The enemy's confidence, once an asset, became a liability as they engaged a vessel capable of striking from unseen distances with precise timing. Japanese sailors, trained for speed and maneuverability, confronted a new reality. They could be targeted effectively at night, even in poor visibility. Their torpedoes, meticulously aimed, were countered by coordinated evasive actions and suppressive fire. Each salvo that missed or fell short intensified pressure, eroding morale and increasing the likelihood of mistakes. The battleship's unexpected effectiveness forced Japanese commanders to adapt mid-battle, a rare acknowledgement of being outmatched despite favorable conditions. This encounter highlighted the broader lesson that technological and tactical innovation could nullify traditional advantages. The Japanese fleet, formidable in surface engagement and night operations, confronted a foe that redefined the rules, proving that even a highly capable adversary could falter when the variables of human skill, leadership, and technology combined in unforeseen ways. Moral/psychological angle. Combat imposed immense psychological strain. For the crew, the night was an arena of heightened awareness, fear, and anticipation. Every radar ping, every distant shell explosion, heightened tension, yet also underscored the importance of vigilance. Success in these conditions reinforced confidence. Failure could erode it instantly. For the Americans, repeated hits on enemy vessels delivered not only strategic advantage, but psychological reinforcement, a validation of training, discipline, and preparedness. Conversely, the Japanese sailors experienced disorientation and frustration. Struck before they could visually identify the enemy, they faced an invisible threat that challenged conventional understanding of naval combat. The morale effects of invisible, precise attacks were profound, forcing reconsideration of assumptions and introducing doubt into previously confident ranks. For the observers and historians, these psychological dimensions provide insight into why the battleship was underrated. Its reputation did not account for the morale, coordination, and mental resilience of its crew. Combat effectiveness is not measured solely in tonnage or armor, but in the ability to maintain composure under stress, execute complex procedures flawlessly, and exploit the enemy's errors. In this way, the human mind became as critical a weapon as any turret or shell. Summary of Section 2 Angles. By examining leadership, enemy response, and the psychological dimension, it becomes clear why the battleship's performance defied expectations. Individual skill, coordinated command, and mental resilience converged with technology and tactics to create a vessel whose impact exceeded its perceived value. What was overlooked on paper became undeniable on the water, revealing the true measure of an underrated warship's significance. Word count, 691 words, white heavy check mark. Next step, shall I proceed to climax/turning point? Section 1. Capturing the decisive engagement of the battleship in full cinematic detail. 750, 900 words. Yes, perfect. Let's begin climax/turning point. Section 1. Focusing on the decisive engagement of the battleship, its radar-guided strikes, and the high-tension night combat. Climax/turning point. Section 1. July 14th, 1943. Night had swallowed the Pacific horizon. Waves crashed against the hull of the American battleship, their rhythm punctuated by the hum of engines and the faint crackle of the radio. Darkness was complete, the moon absent behind thick clouds. Yet aboard the ship, every sailor knew that visibility mattered little tonight. A new instrument, radar, illuminated targets invisible to the naked eye. At 22:17 hours, the first blips appeared on the radar screen. Japanese warships, moving with intent, unaware that they had already been detected. The bridge was alive with controlled tension. Officers leaned over plotting boards, marking positions and calculating courses. Gun crews prepared, checking alignment and ammunition, hands steady despite the icy spray from the Pacific. The captain's voice cut through the hum. Ready all batteries. Wait for my mark. 7 minutes later, the first salvo erupted. The guns thundered, firing 9 massive shells in rapid succession, cutting through darkness and distance with unerring accuracy. Each impact illuminated the Japanese vessel briefly in fire and. Back on the American battleship, officers observed the destruction with a mix of relief and professional detachment. The radar had guided them to a precision few would have imagined possible a decade earlier. Each salvo was calculated, each impact logged. Yet, there was no time for celebration. Orders came swiftly to maintain readiness, to track other enemy vessels that might respond. The ocean was a chessboard, and tonight's moves had revealed just how lethal one well-positioned piece could be. On deck, gunners reloaded rapidly, eyes scanning the darkness, fingers brushing cold steel. Engineers below continued to hum in mechanical harmony, ensuring the ship's systems remained primed. Every sailor, from the youngest deckhand to the captain on the bridge, understood the stakes. Vigilance was as critical as firepower. The Japanese battleship gave one final, trembling shudder. Fires ignited near ammunition magazines, the heat now threatening to trigger catastrophic explosions. Water poured from ruptured hull sections, yet the vessel refused to sink immediately. It was a testament to its construction, but also to the intensity of the assault that had brought it to this precarious state. In the silence between salvos, the crew could hear the distant groans of twisted metal, the water rushing into compartments below, the screams of men caught in a collapsing steel labyrinth. The American gunners maintained discipline, their cadence measured and relentless. Even as explosions rocked the enemy deck, they fired only when necessary, ensuring maximum effect with minimal waste. Radar-guided targeting allowed them to strike vital sections precisely, sparing their own vessel from overexposure to return fire. The balance of power had shifted completely. The Japanese had relied on night cover and maneuver, while the Americans had exploited technology, discipline, and tactical insight. By 22:40 hours, the engagement reached its conclusion. The Japanese battleship, crippled and aflame, began a slow, fatal list. Deck officers called the order to cease fire, and the American crew observed in solemn acknowledgement of the victory. Men exchanged brief nods, understanding the significance of the night's work. The sea, now dark and vast again, carried away the echoes of cannon fire, leaving only the flickering fires of the damaged enemy vessel behind. Yet the implications were clear. Radar had transformed naval combat. The battleship, previously underestimated, had revealed a tactical advantage that went far beyond raw firepower. Commanders would study this engagement for years, noting the precision, coordination, and integration of technology and human skill. The outcome had strategic resonance. One disciplined, prepared, and technologically equipped vessel could dominate the night, shatter enemy morale, and alter the trajectory of a naval campaign. For the crew, exhaustion began to settle in. Faces streaked with sweat, grime, and seawater showed pride tempered by awareness that war was far from over. The ship's logs would record 9 hits in 7 minutes, a statistic that seemed almost impossible in previous eras. But in this moment, the human element remained as vital as the technology. Disciplined sailors, trained officers, and unwavering commitment had combined with radar to create a decisive, historic outcome. As the American battleship steadied itself and resumed patrol, the fires of a Japanese vessel slowly faded into the night. The Pacific was vast, the war relentless. Yet this engagement had demonstrated that even in darkness, clarity, precision, and preparedness could dictate victory. The night had belonged to the Americans, and the lessons of this battle would echo across naval operations for the remainder of the war. Aftermath, Section 1. Dawn broke over a quiet, misted sea. The American battleship floated steadily, decks slick with seawater, smoke, and the residue of the night's fury. Survivors moved cautiously, tending to minor injuries, inspecting equipment, and cataloging the damage inflicted on the enemy. The 9 confirmed hits in 7 minutes had reduced a mighty Japanese battleship to a burning wreck, listing heavily, its once imposing superstructure scarred and crumpled. The first reports radioed to Fleet Command were concise but stark. Enemy vessel incapacitated, engines failing, fires raging across multiple compartments, and structural integrity compromised. Commanders noted the remarkable precision achieved under night conditions. Radar-directed gunnery had allowed shots to find their targets with near-perfect accuracy. Fleet officers would later describe the engagement as a turning point, demonstrating that technological innovation combined with disciplined execution could redefine naval warfare. The Japanese survivors, those fortunate enough to escape the doomed battleship, scrambled into lifeboats and rafts. Smoke and flames consumed the decks, and the groaning hull threatened to sink at any moment. Reports from enemy sources later confirmed significant casualties. Dozens killed outright, many more wounded or trapped in sections swallowed by fire and water. Morale, always fragile after prolonged engagements, had suffered a crippling blow. The psychological impact was immediate. Survivors spoke of chaos, disbelief, and the terrifying realization that stealth and cover no longer guaranteed safety. On the American side, sailors moved with measured relief. Injuries were treated efficiently, weapons were cleaned and reloaded, and radar operators meticulously logged the sequence of hits. The sense of accomplishment was tempered by an acute awareness that the Pacific theater remained unforgiving. The battle demonstrated what could be achieved when precision, technology, and human discipline intersected, but it also highlighted the stakes. Any miscalculation could have led to catastrophic losses. Commanders documented the event with unusual detail, noting the integration of radar into night engagements. The logs described every salvo, every calculated adjustment, and every observation from lookouts. These records would later serve as case studies for naval academies and operational briefings, emphasizing the changing nature of modern naval combat. Traditional strategies relying solely on visual spotting and gunnery calculations were now complemented by electronic detection and methodical targeting, reshaping tactics for the remainder of the war. Intelligence officers intercepted scattered Japanese transmissions, fragmented messages that reflected confusion and shock. The damaged battleship had been a centerpiece of their fleet's defensive strategy, and its rapid incapacitation forced a sudden recalibration of deployments. Other Japanese vessels in the vicinity, previously relying on coordinated maneuvers, now had to account for the unpredictability of radar-guided fire. Fleet formations, previously confident in night concealment, became more cautious, hesitant, and reactive. Beyond the tactical impact, the engagement signaled a psychological victory. American sailors, often overshadowed by the larger strategic battles of the Pacific, felt the tangible weight of their effectiveness. The combination of cutting-edge technology, rigorous training, and disciplined execution had produced results that inspired confidence and reinforced the importance of preparation. Officers circulated through the decks, acknowledging crews, noting their contributions, and recording observations that would guide future missions. While the Japanese fleet faced uncertainty, the Americans had gained more than a tactical victory. They had gained insight. Every hit, every adjustment, every calculated shot reinforced a growing doctrine. That mastery over technology and human skill could shape the outcome of a battle even under the most challenging conditions. The consequences of this night would ripple far beyond the immediate theater, informing strategy, morale, and training for months to come. Aftermath, Section 2. In the days following the engagement, the Pacific theater recalibrated. The Japanese fleet had lost a crucial asset. The battleship struck with 9 precise hits in just 7 minutes, a vessel once considered a linchpin of their naval strategy. Naval intelligence estimated that the ship's loss, coupled with significant crew casualties, would weaken the defensive perimeter around critical island bases. Remaining Japanese vessels operated with heightened caution, wary of night attacks guided by radar, and reconsidered deployment strategies that had previously relied on stealth and darkness. American commanders, conversely, leveraged the encounter as both morale booster and proof of concept. Night combat, once deemed perilous and unpredictable, had been decisively transformed. Fleet officers praised radar operators, gunners, and fire control teams, emphasizing how coordination and technological integration could produce near-perfect results. After-action reports noted that the precision of the attack had reduced the need for prolonged engagement, minimizing exposure to enemy return fire. This efficiency would influence operational planning in subsequent Pacific engagements, reinforcing confidence in electronic warfare as a force multiplier. The psychological impact extended beyond immediate participants. Allied forces, reading dispatches of the strike, recognized the growing dominance of American naval power. Crews previously skeptical of new technology now saw concrete evidence of its effectiveness.